Hello there, guys, and welcome to the watercoloring of whales. So as per usual, I start with just a very light sketch of the whales on my favorite block of Arches paper. I know that this piece is going to have a lot of layers, and that is why I decide to use the block, because you don't have the buckling that usually happens with watercolor paper because it's attached down at the sides already. So the first step to achieve the sort of watery background for the whales is I just wet the space where I want the sort of blue water to fall. I want it to almost look like the whales are in a puddle on the page, so I don't want the whole page to be water. So I just go ahead and create kind of an organic puddly type shape. So I keep the first layer really light and I put just splotches of blue and I let the water do the work for me and take it wherever it wants to go, and I don't worry about going over the whales because I want the effect to look like they're kind of one with the water and in the water. This is just the first layer of what is going to be a lot of water layers, and so I'm not too worried about what happens here. The second layer for this piece is painting in the figures of the whales over these splotches of water. I start with the largest whale. This is a blue whale, and it is in fact blue, so aptly named. I just love to play with adding unexpected colors on different portions of their bodies and just sort of get these happy accidents and surprises that watercolor is so great at achieving. So rather than sort of just go with one blue and paint them all or her all in one blue, we're gonna say this one's a her, I like to add some purples and some turquoises and some gray and just let the colors do as they will. I think that makes for this really, really beautiful organic looking whale. I think watercolor is such a beautiful and natural medium for this piece because obviously whales live in water, they're creatures of water, and so the way that the watercolor looks is just like their natural environment essentially. I am using my Kuretake palette for this piece, and I fell in love with this palette this year. I included it on my best of art supplies, so I'll go ahead and I'll link that below if you want to know exactly what I think about the palette and why. But one thing to note is that there is a lot of granulation that happens naturally with these paints. They're not the same as your regular Western watercolors. They're Gansai Tombi, so they're not actually technically watercolors. They're a bit different, so you get this really natural inclination for the pigment to go one side and the watercolor to go the other. And I'm really playing up this effect. So you can see on the blue whale up there how this happened perfectly. It almost looks like sea salt or crystallization or something like that, where the color separates, and I am completely embracing that for this piece. On that same Art Supply Favorites video, I spoke about this brush. This is the Princeton Velvetouch brush in a size 8, and it is just absolutely a joy to paint with. I have already highly recommended it. This is the brush that I used for all of the whales. I do use a bigger brush for the background. It's a bit too small for that, but it was just really perfect for painting all of these whales, both the kind of bulk of their bodies and the little details. So each of the whales, of course, naturally has different colors, but I had fun with it. I played around with the colors a lot. One of the joys of this palette is that it had so many different blues and stuff, and so it's got like light turquoise, dark turquoise, periwinkle, all of the above, purples, cobalt blue, all of these colors. And I used all of them and I mixed them, and I just really got to know the palette so well through painting these whales. And you think, you've got 11 whales. How much variation can you really get? And that was one of the beautiful challenges of this piece. That is what I kept in the back of my mind the whole time. How do I make it a little bit more interesting? Of course, we need to have a magical narwhal in the mix because that is one of my specialties here at Studio Jess. So the thing that I love about watercolors is the more you get to know your paints, the more you know how to work with them and not force them to do stuff that they're not going to want to do. And you know what's going to happen when you layer them, and you kind of know how they're going to dry and stuff. And you just basically realize that you don't have control over them. And so, you stop pretending that you do. And everyone really has their own way of painting with watercolors. There's no right and wrong way, it's like a dance, and you have your own little moves and tempo. And my way is I like to try to achieve as much as possible in the first layer and pretty much just stick to 2 layers for the subject matter. This is probably because I'm kind of impatient. So yes, such a gratifying part where you create their little expressions and you really figure out who these whales are. They're all quite happy. Here I'm just using a number 4 graphite pencil, quite sharp. In the digitization process, I usually go over the eyes and the expressions a little bit. So there's definitely a little bit of wiggle room when you actually take it to the computer. The idea for this piece was inspired by those old-timey posters that have all of a certain kind of species on one poster. So it's kind of a riff off of that, and I just selected 11 whales of the world to make my own version of one of these posters. And this is where I got a little bit scared because I was like, oh, am I going too much over these things? I mean, I actually thought the piece looked really pretty right then, but I wanted it to be really deep and really rich and really layered like the ocean. And I really wanted the whales to not look like they were just sort of floating on blue, but actually part of the ocean, because they are. And so I just had courage in my conviction, and I started doing a lot of water layers over these whales. This is the beauty of Arches paper. It can take so much, so many layers. So this is the second layer on the whales, and the benefit of this is this allows me to really sort of bring them to the forefront again and add some depth and a little bit of volume to them where they need it. You know, you want the whales to be what people are actually looking at. That actually was probably the biggest challenge of this piece for me. And then the very final step, I always add a little bit of shadow. Just adds that little extra something. And a little bit of colored pencil, just for that final oomph. And I just add my little signature to the piece. And voila! For a more detailed and written out version, you can go to my website. I also have some giclée prints of this available on Etsy. And if you paint any whales, I would love to see them. So until next time, TTFN.